Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Chrissy, and I would like to welcome you to the Doylestown Bookshop's virtual event series. I am very happy to introduce Alina M. Baker Rogers, Dr. Alina M. Baker Rogers, and Fasaha M. Traylor as they discuss They Carried Us, the social impact of Philadelphia's Black women leaders. The authors will be in conversation for about a half hour and will be participating in a Q&A with the viewers. If you would like to submit a question, please click on Ask a Question at the bottom of your screen and enter your question there. If you're watching from a phone or tablet, click the icon with a question mark to submit your questions. If you would like to purchase this book from the Doylestown Bookshop, click the button on your screen that says Buy the Book. We have curbside pickup available at both of our locations, or we can ship the book to you. I've had a few questions during past events from viewers who are accustomed to Zoom events. So to avoid any confusion, only our guests will be able to participate through video and audio. You may interact with us, however, through the chat box on your screen and through the Q&A. Now a little bit about our guests. Alina is a native West Philadelphian who now resides in Virginia. She is an honorary board member and former president of the Philadelphia Child Advocacy Organization, Public Citizens for Children and Youth. She served on mayoral advisory committees and was a governor's appointee and board chair of the Philadelphia County Assistance Office. A lifelong educator and having earned a doctorate in higher education leadership from Widener University in 2003, Alina is a former academic department director and assistant professor of educational research. Fasaha has been an educator, activist, writer, administrator, board chair, and foundation officer. She founded and directed an independent school, operated programs to link the resources of a local university with community needs, and taught in public alternative education programs. She was a copy editor at a major metropolitan newspaper, served on the board of a national human rights organization, the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, and co-founded the Ain't I a Woman Network, an activist group formed in the wake of the Clarence Thomas Anita Hill hearings. She is also a principal of Lift Every Voice, LLC. Hello, ladies, and welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
thank you very much for having us. We're so grateful to be able to share the women of They Carried Us with whomever wants to listen. Um, we thought that we would begin our presentation here tonight with a short video, a short 10-minute video that is basically an enactment of the introduction to the book. We thought you would be interested in it because it gives a lot of details about a woman who spent most of her life uh, down the road, as it were, in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. We're interested in you watching the video because um, in the performance, uh, the woman who is enacted actually expresses her appreciation for all of the rest of the 94 women in the book. So we'd like to introduce you to Black Alice, or some called her Alice of Dunk's Ferry. We're missing sound, Chrissy.
It's coming.
No. No, there's the audio is missing. Hmm.
No audio?
Text Chris. Yeah, there's no audio.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Let's start our
Hmm.
Shouldn't it be, the volume should be on the right-hand side to cue it up?
Is hmm. Okay.
Let me, I guess I could put it in the
Sorry,
chat
I
and
can
play it from
hear
there.
it.
You can hear it?
I can. Let me unplug.
Maybe you should unplug your mic is off. Maybe, is that heavy? Hmm.
Okay. Well, perhaps we're not going to have a video. Now we heard that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll work on that and see if I can come back in. I had turned my mic off for a moment just to see if I unplugged my earbuds rather, just to see if that might help. I'll work on that and I'll come
Okay.
back in.
Well, maybe we can just start by talking about the structure of the book. Well, to just tell you a little bit about the book itself. The book is it's a rather long book, as people may tell you, and it's based on. It contains biographies of 95 women. Um, Half of them are women, contemporary women, for whom we did original interviews, and half of them are women we call forerunners. And the forerunners are people who lived from 1694, the year 1694, to, the latter part of the 20th century. So we really thought that it was important to include both the forerunners and the contemporary women, because what we discovered in the process of writing the book was how much the forerunners express the aspirations, the motivations, and even the experiences of the women who came after them. And so we wanted people to have a sense of that. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to um, basically share with you the quotations that begin each chapter. The book is consists of 9 chapters, and the chapters correspond to different segments, different sectors. Community work, medicine, the arts. So these women span all of those sectors. So I don't know, Sissy, do you want to start or?
Sure. Yeah, I can go ahead and start. Chapter one is titled "Community Building and Movement Activism," and as Fasaha mentioned, the at the beginning of each chapter, we have a quote by one of the women in the book, and it should go without saying, and it certainly does, that each of the quotes represent some experience or experiences they had at some stage of their lives. So this first quote is by Dr. Gwendolyn Zahara Simmons, who was a civil rights activist. She said, "I'm learning in school that Black people have been fighting this thing since we were first brought here. I'm learning in church that this is God's will for us to fight it."
You want to just go back and forth and I'll do the next one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, am I ready? No. Oh boy. Okay. The chapter Civic Institutions in Business um, begins with a quotation from Shirley M. Dennis. "It was such a battle, but it meant so much to me because it meant so much to people on the bottom.
Chapter 3, Education, the Road to Racial Uplift. I mentioned that I Have a Dream was a good inspirational name, but I had another, said Dr. Ruth Wright Hare. Another that was more personally meaningful. Tell them we are rising.
Chapter 4 is about women of faith. Despite opposition, I was in the place God called me to be. And that was a quotation from Bishop Barbara C. Harris.
Catherine Kitty F. Woodard begins chapter 5, which is journalism, media, and communications, with this quote in reference to her newspaper. The Independent was changing the image that a Black person, to get in the paper, had to steal something, had to kill somebody, or stab somebody. Instead of all the crime, it kind of told you what Blacks were doing.
Chapter 6 is medicine and community health. There were no demonstrations. If you wanted the job, you just took it as is. And that was a quotation from Dr. Helen O. Dickens.
Chapter 7 is Law and Government, Shadow and Light. Dr. Ethel Allen said, we have to get into the system to make it work for us.
Chapter 8, which is the chapter about Black women in sports. Just a moment, got to get to the right page. Knowing they weren't going to give us certain experiences, we were just innovative and decided we were going to do it ourselves. And that was a quotation from Tina Sloan Green.
In chapter 9, which is the final chapter in the book, we have a quote here from Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. This quote was actually from 1894. Chapter is The Art of the Beautiful. Frances said, let me make songs for the people. Each of the, as you see with each of the chapters, there is a quote from, one of the women in the book. At the beginning of each of the women's stories, there's also a quote, by them as well, and interspersed throughout primarily the stories of the contemporary women. There are multiple quotes that are assigned to each of the women, or rather, quotes from each of the women. And we found that this was a really good way to further bring their stories to life and to have them jump off of the pages in a different way. Do you want to see the videos done or ready, or you want to add something else?
I don't know. Let's see. Chrissy, is it?
Yes, I think I have figured out a way to do this. What I'm going to do is mute your mics if that's okay and stream it through. I'm going to unplug my earbuds and try to let that sound run.
Okay.
So we're going to see how that goes. Is it working?
I should turn it up some more.
My sisters, I would never have guessed that we would gather together in a book. I wish I could meet all of you. Being together here is comfort somehow. Books can be deceiving, but they say and what they leave out.
Maybe not enough bandwidth.
Again in 1830, in 1866. The person said anything about my parents. My father, Madagascar Jack, came from Madagascar. My mother, Sarah, came from nowhere. They were brought by William Penn's rich Quaker friends.
Copy the YouTube link
Yeah, I'm
and
just.
view it on your own because
I'm so sorry about that.
that's okay. That's okay. Hey,
I
listen,
put the link in the
this is-
chat. Please view it after the discussion.
okay. So
Why don't you want to talk about Black Alice then, or you want to handle like that?
well, we could do that. The reason that we wanted people to hear this enactment of Black Alice was because we wanted Black Alice in this book because she is the first Black woman born of African parents that history records. And we wanted to begin the book with her. And the strange thing was that even though she had been written about by 3 different authors, there were so many details missing from her life. And in that way, it was sort of emblematic of what happens with Black women in general. In other words, their humanity is erased, invisible. And so we thought that she was really a wonderful sort of symbol of what we were trying to address with this book. So we do urge you to look at the video, and we'd be happy to get any comments about it. But it is about Black Alice, and who, as we said, was spent much of her life at Dunk's Ferry. So I think that I guess we need to take questions from people. If anybody has any questions about the book.
If anybody has questions, if you'd like to click on Ask a Question on your screen, you can submit your questions there. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, I have a few, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
I'd love for you to talk about each of your process in writing this book, to the research, the actual writing. How long did the project take in total to complete?
The project probably took in total, really, somewhere between 6.5 to 7 years. So quite a bit of time. One of the things that we feel is very important to say out of the gate is that this book only includes 95 women. It's 600 some odd pages, and so that is all to say that we in no way, shape, or form have touched the limit of the number of Black women who we think deservedly should be in They Carried Us. With that said, we sort of alluded to it a little bit ago, where we talked about forerunners and contemporary women. The forerunners, as Fasaha has already mentioned, were women who date back to 1694, which was when Black Alice was born, and uh, they went as far as perhaps the maybe is the middle of the 20th century. These are women who obviously are no longer with us. Then the working to build the book around those women really involved a lot of research, and that research was combing, not just obviously you just can't limit your research to the internet. Certainly, being in touch with uh, um, libraries of Congress, and historical society. I know that Fasaha, you tapped into the Pennsylvania Historical Society quite a bit. I did as well. We became members of research groups, and internet libraries, with just trying to dig out as much information about these women as possible. And that was one of the beauties of being able to do this. But for me, it also left us wanting, because there's so much documentation, rather there's so much history that has been lost and not documented. And that's one of the things that we wanted to rectify with through They Carried Us. The contemporary women, uh, those for each woman, we conducted one-on-one interviews, and those interviews were probably anywhere easily from 3 to 6 hours, depending on who we were speaking with at the time, and depending on how much they had to say, and how much they were involved with, over time. So, these are women who invariably were founders. They were the first Black women to accomplish something, in the city, something specific in their area, in the city of Philadelphia. Certainly, they were women who had reach and significant impact in the city of Philadelphia, but also a large number of the women's work has been felt beyond Philadelphia as well. The nitty gritty of writing a book, things you can't escape. You can't escape, transcription. You can't escape, editing, and a lot of time writing those things, and even then, when you get to the end, you've got to do your bibliography and your index and those things that we were exhausted by then. But those are all important components.
I think that the only other thing that I would add is that in some ways this was really a sort of joyous experience. Um, it was grueling but joyous, because there were so many things that we found out about so many different people. Um, delving into their backgrounds, and especially their childhoods. Um, and we really think that, providing details about um, people who later became famous, but who, as children, were just kids, okay,
Yeah.
with kid kinds of concerns, concerns about having enough, concerns about being able to realize your dreams, um, concerns about parents and family, concerns about, um, well, I guess I wouldn't say that the women actually knew that they needed mentors, but the fact that mentors stepped into their lives at key moments was really, that happened with all the women in the book. And sometimes it was a family member, sometimes it was, a colleague, or a professor, or sometimes it was, an uncle. Um, So that was really, we really thought that that was very, very gratifying to be able to shine a light on that process.
Yeah, and if I can jump to, I want to sort of piggyback, if you don't mind, with that on that question, with the question that Ruth Anderson has posted in the chat. She's asking a question about whether or not we could share childhood or youth experience that moved us to advocate for Black and Brown women in our adult lives, our adult years, and how can kids today connect with, and share your message. How does all your message apply to all women? Well, I love that question, and I don't know that we've had that question from anyone yet. So I'm going to jump right in with it. Uh, I had to think for a second, but I definitely have had childhood experiences that moved me to embark on the work that I did in the field of education, higher education in particular. I remember being. It's funny. I was telling Chrissy that I have a 22-year-old granddaughter, and she kind of looked at me. But this is part of the story. The story is that I was a teen mom. I was a teen mom, and my mom didn't have much of anything at all. There were four of us, and what she did have was the belief that she was going to support her kids, me and my sister and my two brothers, and in any way that she could. And so she did. One of the things that happened to me, though, and it's something that happened to me, and it speaks directly to uh, the work that I went on to do as a professional. And in some ways, I think, it speaks to some of the challenges that a number of the women had in the book as well. These are not women overall who, you put it like this, a number of the women, were poor. A number of them, came from low income families, whether in the North or in the South. I grew up poor in West Philadelphia with three siblings and a single mom. And I was a teenage mother. And at some point when I was on welfare, um, the state of Pennsylvania was changing its laws about people on welfare having to get off of welfare. I mean, stop going to college and go to work. And what happened for me was that my caseworker realized that I was so close to graduating from college that he was not going to be he was not going to be party to my having to stop going to college. And so that actually was one of the first jobs, similarly, that I had as a professional, working at the Community College of Philadelphia with women on public assistance and directing a program that helped them move from welfare to independent through college degrees. So that speaks very specifically to my life experience and something I've done later in life. How can kids connect today with and share our message? We have programs that we are in the early phases of developing with Teach for America and the School District of Philadelphia, where the project is they carried us for the classroom. And what we know from speaking with easily 40 teachers over the summer and going into the fall when we conducted focus groups with these teachers that a lot of young people in the Philadelphia area, Black and Brown, know very little about their immediate history, know very little about their history, period, and certainly don't know much of anything about the women who were in this book. They carried us in other books as well. So um, we believe strongly that when kids see themselves and can identify themselves through mirrors like they carried us, which they can, and even with people like me, they can. So it's very important to us that this connection with young people is extremely important to us. I hope I'm answering your question. How does your message apply to all women? I think our message applies to all women in that, without getting political at all, we women, Black, Brown, and, differently, white women as well, we have experienced silence or being silenced rather, being unheard. And that is something that I think really comes through and they carried us, the importance of making your voice heard, the importance of standing up and, doing these really important things that make a difference in the world around you.
One of the experiences that I had that really has made me really committed to the idea of bringing They Carried Us to the classroom is that in 8th grade, I read The Fire Next Time and it was the first time that I ever had any inkling that Black people wrote. And I was a reader. I was a reader. And that experience was so deeply profound that I really, I recall it to this day. And so the idea of being able to identify with and to understand experiences of people who look like you or who have similar life experiences as you do, that's a very important thing for young people growing up. And I know it was important to me. And once I broke that barrier, then of course I read all kinds of things from all kinds of people. But I do think that people don't. I'm not sure that people understand the impact of that, the impact of being able to see yourself in a book.
Yeah. Yeah. My To this question of, can you tell us about your mentors? I had several mentors, but there's two that I always sort of hone in on. And before I go there, I want to say, as Fasaha mentioned, all of the women in They Carried Us had mentors. They, may have not, planned it, but it happened. And invariably, with the stories of the contemporary women, we wanted them to talk about, and they did, the importance of having mentors and of being mentors, and the significant difference that can make in someone else's life. The mentor who I think about the most was a Black woman who was the director of personnel at the United States Mint when I was a student at Drexel University and I was doing my co-op experience. And I guess I had it in my idea that it was in my head that it was, that I would get this bachelor's degree and that's it. I would go on in the world and I would do, fantastic things. And she wasn't having any of it. She saw in me someone who she thought should go further in school and who could really use education to make a difference in other people's lives. And so I would never forget this one day I went into her office and she had a bunch of college catalogs sitting on her on her desk, for me to look at. And basically she was like, pick one, what are you going to do? And then my other mentor was someone else who was connected to Drexel University. She was actually my co-op counselor, I guess it was, and she was a Black woman as well. And she really pretty much held my hand through graduate school and into working on my doctorate, and in particular, the work that goes into doing a dissertation. So I feel like I've been really fortunate to have had those two women, behind me. One other thing I want to say that I didn't say was that I mentioned that my family was on public assistance and I was on public assistance at one point. In in the introduction, Chrissy mentioned that I was the chair of the Philadelphia County Assistance Office. That brought me sweet pleasure. But essentially, what that meant was that I became the chair of the Department of Public Welfare in Philadelphia.
There's a couple of things that I want to say. Number one, that One of the people in the book, Sandra Dungy Glenn, and this speaks to how important the mentoring experience is, but also that mentoring requires that you believe in someone. And Sandra Dungy Glenn, who was at Penn State at the time and was thinking that she was going to go into environmental science, was experiencing a lot of, I don't even know what to call it, except she was feeling ignored. She was, her advisor would not give her advice. And she finally ran into a woman, a white woman from Australia, who saw something in her and helped her to um, really envision a career in public policy, sent her to Washington to monitor different congressional hearings um, and other kinds of things that would, advance her career. And I mention her because I want to go back to what I just said, and that is mentoring requires that someone believe in you. So that's very important. Then the second thing that I wanted to say is that I think probably the very first mentoring act, although he didn't know that he was giving me this mentoring experience, was a relative who, when I was a kid, asked me my opinion about something. That was so mind blowing to me. What was my opinion? He thought I had something valuable to say. That was really a very important experience for me. Just the idea, the validation that comes from when someone thinks that you are worthwhile. So,
Yeah.
any other questions?
I don't see any coming in, but I do have another one myself, if you don't mind.
Good.
I was wondering if you'd like to talk about the art on the cover of your book.
Oh, we'd love to. We'd love to. The art was donated by Barbara Bullock, who whose story is in the book. And we've told this story a couple of times, but it still is kind of astounding. We were writing. We were, trying to get this book together. We had not given more than, I would say, 15 seconds worth of thought to what the cover was going to be. And when we finally finished all these stories and we started, I guess we sort of thought that it was going to be some kind of collage or something.
Yeah.
But then when you have like 95 women and you think about how in the world would that make, we said, oh no, that is not going to work. So we said then we need something symbolic. And so we called up Barbara Bullock and she said, well, sure, I have plenty of images, but you have to come and choose it. So went over to her studio, which is, that alone that's a mind-boggling place to be. I keep telling people when you go there, when you leave, you have to go home and go to bed. It's so visually stimulating. But we had two images, and this was the one that we chose. We came away from our studio with two images, and this was the one that we chose. And it wasn't until later that we found out that this image, the name of this image, was Ubiquitous Presence, which I said, did you just name that? She said, no, that's what it's always been called. So Barbara Bullock, the artist who has, her work is all over Philadelphia. She's done really amazing work. And we couldn't have been happier than to have that image for the cover.
One of the things I want to say about about the image is that, you know, when I first saw it, I thought it was metal, but it's not. It's some process of layering paper on top of paper on top of paper, and shellacking it with paint and shellacking it with paint and then forming it. And I have no idea how she did that, but I really thought it was a metal sculpture or something like that, and surprised to find out that it's very different. So
Oh, it's beautiful and it really suits the book. It's breathtaking, really. Yeah. Really.
well, there's just one last comment about there. You know, on the shoulder there, it looks like someone's being carried.
Yeah, it's a small figure on the
Yeah.
show.
Was there anything else you'd like to tell us? I know when we first met, we talked a little bit about um, mentioning some of the women, and I think you've mentioned a few already that are from maybe the Bucks County area that are in the book.
Yeah,
Did you
yeah.
want to talk
Yeah,
about that?
we thought about doing that, um, and then that's when we decided to do the chapter reads and the quotations, you know, instead. So I'm sorry we're not really prepared to do that.
Well,
However,
I have two
you
people
too?
that
Okay, go ahead. Yeah,
just jump. One of my favorite people in the book is Carolyn Davenport Moore,
right.
who came to Norristown from South Carolina and became the executive secretary of the Philadelphia NAACP and was responsible really for, I would say, spearheading a whole era of employment equality in Philadelphia through um, basically breaking down the segregation of the Philadelphia. Well, it wasn't called the Philadelphia Transit Union at the time. It had another name at the time, but um, you know, the transit company was not, it did not allow Black people to drive trolleys, trains, etc. And through the work that she devised at the NAACP, um, that whole structure of employment discrimination basically crumbled. Another person is Bishop Barbara Harris, um, the first woman bishop of the Episcopal Church. And she had a small congregation in Norristown. So I think that those two women, and both of them, in fact, I would have to say that there is no one in this book that you would say, "Oh, I don't think I really want to know about them." Every one of the women in this book they are just so compelling and so amazing in all different kinds of ways, um, that you know I just think that their how should I put it their their personalities come through. I mean, this is definitely not a sort of dry, you know, something that you would pick up on Wikipedia. This is, you know, the personalities of these women are really amazing, really amazing. But Barbara Harris and Carolyn Davenport Moore are both have ties to Norristown.
And what Fasaha just said about the women being, you know, interesting. One of the questions that we get a lot of the time is who is your favorite? And I don't really have a favorite. I have favorites, and Fasaha likes to say that her favorite is the person that she's talking about at that moment, and that's really because these women's lives were just so incredibly dynamic, and it's just so much that you can learn from them. Um, Yeah, so I don't have a favorite, although there's a whole lot of them that I like.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for joining us this evening. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about They Carried Us. And I'd like to encourage everyone who's watching or watching the replay to click the link in our chat box to watch that YouTube video. I'll
Yeah.
also add that link anywhere I post a video. If you would like to buy the book, click the button on our screen that says buy the book. We have copies available at the Doylestown Bookshop. Thank you both again so much. I wish you the best of luck with this book.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you. Yes, thanks for having us. We really enjoyed talking about it.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure. Well, thank you all for watching and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.